Hey, Rick and Morty is back for another season. And do I care? I don't know. I need to talk about Rick and Morty. I don't know if I've talked about Rick and Morty on any of my rants, but I remember a few years ago when I discovered it, seasons 1 and 2, I found them online, I watched them, and I thought, wow, this is a great concept for a show. And here's the thing about Rick and Morty. It doesn't feel like a show in the sense that we do shows now. I'm not saying that the science fiction elements are all, and a lot of the stuff that happens on the show and the characters. There are a lot of Rick and Morty clones out there. There really are. And, and it's kind of sad that we're kind of seeing this. They had like Final Space. They even have their own Rick and Morty clone made by the same people, Solar Opposites, which I can't stand. I've tried getting into that show and I just can't stand it. But Rick and Morty, I think, definitely set the bar high as far as like, okay, what imagination can do on a show. Because I've seen episodes of Rick and Morty that have more imagination put in one episode than an entire season of certain other shows. And that's saying something, because Rick and Morty is pretty fantastical. Now, I'm going to say this, and this might be a controversial topic, but Rick and Morty doesn't appear to be going anywhere. A lot of shows appear to be going in a certain direction. If you watch any show like this, they always have some sort of story arc. There's always some sort of thing that they're trying to do. Now, television taught us for years, and when I say years, I mean, because somewhere around, 2000s or something like that, so shows just started to devote themselves more to their story arc, and they're trying to make a bigger storyline. And so each episode that they were trying to do was supposed to be a contribution to that storyline, but at the same time, it was standing on its own. So yeah, so let's put, okay, actually, I don't even know how they do this now, but hey, like if you watch Star Trek, for example, in like the 60s, or if you watched it in the 80s with the Next Generation, or 90s, each episode, you could probably air them in just about any order. Now, there were things that would carry over into future episodes, and occasionally the show would give an opportunity for its worlds to branch out. Like you would get like, okay, there's this new civilization here that they discover, like the Borg or something like that, and then they appear in a few episodes. And yeah, Rick and Morty is like that. They are constantly introducing new things to this world, and this world is devoted not only of like aliens from other planets and spaceships and stuff, but it's devoted to, say, a lot of just science fiction conventions overall. And there is a huge multiverse in it going on there. That being said, there was a plot line, I believe, in the last season with Rick Prime and how Rick manages to hunt him down. And honestly, I remember that episode being very well done. I remember it, but I don't really remember it being anything that really settled anything. There's a underlying plotline with a character known as Evil Morty. And I kind of feel like this character rears its ugly head every once in a while, and I'm not really certain what they're trying to do with it. In watching Rick and Morty, I always felt like there was some information that was being held back from us. And that once that information gets revealed, that's going to eventually start the ball rolling as far as like ending the series and then actually resolving all the plot lines on this. The issue is Rick and Morty doesn't really have anything like that. There's the Evil Morty thing for sure. But if they wanted to, they could resolve that in a single episode with just some clever writing. And Rick and Morty does have some clever writing in it. I will have to say. And yeah, just thinking about that kind of, okay. I think, is that the first time I've yawned at one of these things? Okay, maybe I'm not ranting hard enough. So here's what I have to say about Rick and Morty. I feel like Rick and Morty is one of those shows that is probably going to be, and probably is, like The Simpsons, where you're tuning in every week for a plot line that you know is not going to carry over into the next week. That's fine. That's how we used to watch television. Maybe this is how we need to start watching television again. That is, Rick and Morty begins, and it basically just takes plot lines of, say, science fiction television and books, and then they just work it in. And this time in the first episode was a really good one. It actually reminded me of earlier episodes of Rick and Morty, where essentially, basically, Summer and Rick, they are older for some reason, and they're in this world that is apparently having a war over chargers for some reason. And so to settle this war, Summer has to basically create this device that can essentially charge everything without having to plug it in. And that's essentially the resolution. And once she does that, she suddenly finds herself waking up out of this world. And it's revealed that Rick had put Summer and Rick into this kind of strange Matrix type thing. I can only really describe it as that because the show actually describes it as that. And so when because apparently Rick and Summer had stolen Rick's charger, or they used Rick's charger, and apparently that is not allowed. So he puts them in that machine to essentially teach them a lesson. Now, if you know anything about Rick, Rick is petty. Rick will, if you do something against Rick, he will hold it against you forever. That is how Rick operates. He is not meant to be an idealized character. He's not meant to be a character that should be imitated. I kind of feel like he's a character that you love to hate, and oftentimes you do end up kind of hating him because there are times where he's kind of just being a jerk. Does he ever learn? Not really. And I kind of get the feeling like it'd be like watching The Simpsons and seeing Homer not being a buffoon. It would be kind of like, yeah, he's sort of supposed to be that role, isn't he? Rick, that's the role he is. So, and then it ends up with Rick and Summer deciding to team up and actually putting Rick in this thing. And here's the thing I liked about this episode. They basically dealt with the fact that if you were in that type of environment, this sort of simulation thing, and then were brought out of it, that stuff is still real to you. You've had stuff like that are real memories and that you can't deny, and you might have PTSD from them. And they show this, and they show this really well. I like this episode a whole bunch. This episode is, I think I might have done like a list of like my top favorite Rick and Morty episodes, and the Parasites one is the Total Recall is easily still my favorite. I've watched that episode so many times. But I have to say this episode would probably be in the top 10 because I think it was done that well. And these are the types of episodes we need to do. The ones that simply just take an old concept from sci-fi and just build upon it. Rick and Morty was really good at that. It needs to go back to that roots, and it's not doing it. Because the follow-up episode that I saw kind of dealt with the other Beth, because Rick and Morty has two Beths for some reason, and honestly, I've actually kind of forgotten. I think one is a clone of the other, and I don't. And of course, this is one of those things where they never really fully decide like which Beth is the real Beth, because yeah, in the end, it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, what are they going to do? Switch it out? So yeah, basically that episode begins with Beth calling Rick to get a ride, and here's the thing about it. I actually kind of thought that we were going to get a really good episode where Rick and Beth were going to get closer together, but unfortunately the plot kind of reared its ugly head, and Rick and Beth had to work together, and honestly I found that I just didn't really care about the episode's plot. I just didn't. I just kind of felt like, okay, I just, and maybe it's because I was more invested in these characters than I was in that. So I don't know. Rick and Morty has had some real bummer episodes. It just does. I mean, every show will have this. I mean, one of my favorite shows, South Park, even has like some serious duds in it. And yeah, I don't want to get into talking about why The Simpsons has been almost living dead. And yeah, Family Guy is dead on. It's just a constant. It's like zombies. So I don't know. I just kind of feel like if Rick and Morty wants to continue, it could continue. Just do something smart every week. And I know that's a hard thing to ask. So I think it's going to be like Simpsons now. Rick and Morty is going to put out the occasional gem, but for the most part, the rest might be a bunch of crap. Then, it's been Mark Rollins from the Geek Church, signing off.